Grading every
So
NBA
the
team's 2025 trade deadline. I've seen this dude before.
2025 trade deadline is officially
They
over.
used to do rebuilds, right?
And we just witnessed the greatest trade
Back in the
deadline
heyday.
in NBA history. And for this video, I wanted to grade
talk like
every
that.
NBA team's 2025 deadline. So some teams made a lot of moves, some teams made some big moves, some small moves, or maybe no moves at all. And I'm going to give a letter grade for how everybody's deadline went down. Like always, you can let me know what you agree with or disagree with down below, or just let me know what you would give a letter grade for your favorite team's deadline in the comments. And like always, if you do enjoy the videos, I'd appreciate you dropping a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button if you're not already, and let's get into it. So I actually think the Sacramento Kings didn't have the worst trade deadline in the world. They did make a pretty notable trade, trading away De'Aaron Fox, their homegrown franchise star, to the San Antonio Spurs in a 3-team deal. They were able to get back Zach LaVine, Sidy Cissoko, a first-round pick from the Hornets in 25, which is going to be 2 seconds. They get a 2027 first via the Spurs and a 2031 first via the Timberwolves. They also get 3 second-rounders in this deal. They also sent Kevin Huerter to the Chicago Bulls, and then they also made a deal for a center in Jonas Valanciunas. They acquired him from the Washington Wizards in exchange for Sidy Cissoko, rerouting him to Washington, and they also gave up 2 future second-rounders. And they also made another deal at the buzzer, one I do like a ton, and that is them getting Jake LaRavia from the Memphis Grizzlies, who really wasn't that involved in the rotation anymore. Colby Jones and Alex Len are going to DC, and then some second-round picks were also involved in this deal. So I'm going to give the Sacramento Kings a B. I didn't love the De'Aaron Fox trade when it initially happened, but I do think Zach LaVine gives them a chance to compete right now, and still over the next few years, they can still have a high-powered offense with LaVine, DeRozan, and Domantas Sabonis. I'm really excited to see what Malik Monk can do as the starting point guard. They were able to keep their young guys, Keon Ellis, Devin Carter, Keegan Murray, and also a nice trade asset in Trey Lyles at around $8 million moving forward. They got a good backup center in Jonas Valanciunas, probably their best backup center in quite some time. And they also got some additional draft capital. So like De'Aaron Fox still has a higher ceiling than what he could be in this league than Zach LaVine did, but I don't think they're far apart in terms of talent right now. So I do think with all things considered and a little bit of leverage that Sacramento lost, they did fairly well at the deadline. So I'm giving it a B. I'm giving the 2025 Phoenix Suns deadline an F. It seems like that they destroyed that locker room chemistry. They were trying so hard to get Bradley Beal to waive his no trade clause, and they could turn Beal into Jimmy Butler. They couldn't pull that off. Jimmy goes to Golden State. They made a trade with the Charlotte Hornets, sending them Yusuf Nurkic and a first-round pick they got in that 3-for-1 pick swap with the Jazz in exchange for Cody Martin and Vasily Micic. And even though I'm going to include Nick Richards and them acquiring him a few weeks ago in this deal, I still think this was an F trade deadline for the Phoenix Suns. They're currently 500 on the season. They're currently Minnesota and San Antonio either getting better or trying to win right now because they don't own draft capital in the 2025 draft. There's a realistic chance that the Phoenix Suns don't even make the play-in tournament this year, with being the highest paid team in the NBA, being over $100 million over the luxury tax, and being a second apron team.
Pretty much
it's been a disastrous
guard, right?
season for the Phoenix Suns. Detroit made some small moves at the deadline. They had a lot of cap space. They had some roster spots. They got involved in the Jimmy Butler trade to the Golden State Warriors. They ended up acquiring Dennis Schroeder in that deal, with Lindy Waters and Josh Richardson not going to Detroit anymore. And they also picked up KJ Martin from the Philadelphia 76ers and getting some second round picks, in which allowed them to take on KJ Martin's money so Philadelphia could get under the luxury tax. I'm going to give Detroit's deadline a B. Yeah, I would have liked if they went after Brandon Ingram, maybe Zach LaVine before he got traded, or CJ McCollum, just to give Cade Cunningham some offensive help. But the Detroit Pistons have a lottery protected first this year. If they make the playoffs, that goes to Minnesota. And I think they're fine making the playoffs because they're taking steps in the right direction. And I think that was going to be a high goal going into the year, to make the playoffs in 2025. And I do like them adding Dennis Schroeder. He should help them in the backcourt and take a little bit of the load off Cade Cunningham and gives them a good backup point guard. Would have I liked the Detroit Pistons to make a bigger move? Yes, but they're trusting the process and they're not trying to make any short-sighted deals. So I'm going to give them a B. Before we get back into the video, I want to give a word from today's sponsor, Underdog. Underdog is by far the best way. 1,000 plus for this year bonus cash when you make your first deposit in a free pick. I'm going to give Indiana a D plus for this year's deadline. They didn't trade Obi Toppin. They didn't try to make any win now moves for a team that was in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. This would be a little bit lower if they didn't trade for Thomas Bryant back in December, but they basically just traded away James Wiseman to the Toronto Raptors and gave them some cash just to get under the luxury tax and save them some money. I just thought Indiana could have tried to make a win now move, and for a team, like I said, that was in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, they're currently the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. Yes, they've been playing very well now that they're fully healthy with the guys that aren't out for the year, I think they could have just made another win now move. The Knicks only made one trade, and they were involved in the 3-team deal with Milwaukee and Washington. They sent Jericho Sims to the Milwaukee Bucks, and they got DeLon Wright, the draft rights to Hugo Besson, and some cash considerations. I'm just going to give it a C. The Knicks didn't do anything crazy at the deadline. They did add a good guard defender in DeLon Wright, but this team needs a wing defender. I definitely think the Knicks could have made a little bit more of a win now move for a team that's window is currently in play this season if everybody can be healthy in the playoffs. They didn't trade Mitchell Robinson. I just thought the Knicks could have made a more notable move, but I'm not surprised that they didn't really make any crazy deals at this year's deadline. I'm going to give the Brooklyn Nets a D. They didn't trade Cam Johnson at the deadline. What if Cam Johnson suffers like an injury in the second half of the year and you're going to lose some value for him in the offseason? And maybe the market really wasn't there for Cam Johnson. Maybe Houston wasn't going to give up valuable assets, or Orlando, or OKC. I just think Brooklyn could have either traded away Cam Thomas, Nick Claxton, Darren Sharp, or Cam Johnson, as this team is just trying to rebuild, and they've been winning some games as of late. I'm surprised nobody even wanted D'Angelo Russell to add some shooting to their team, so I just think Brooklyn could have been a little bit more involved as a seller at this year's deadline, and they didn't really do so. Yeah, they can move Cam Johnson in the offseason, but I just don't know if his value is going to be as high, because the team trading for Cam Johnson gets him for one less playoff run than they would have at this year's deadline. I'm going to give the Minnesota Timberwolves a C- for a team that didn't make a single deal at the 2025 deadline. They are a second apron team, so they were very restricted on
we inquired about KD. We called the Suns up about
deals they
KD.
could make, but they didn't trade away Dante DiVincenzo. They didn't trade away Julius Randle, who could leave them in the offseason. Nas Reed is going to be a free agent at the end of the year, and Minnesota is 28-23, and they still have one of the best players in the NBA in Anthony Edwards. I would have liked to see them be a little bit more aggressive. I'm fine with them not making a single move at all, but I'm just going to drop it down to a C- compared to a C, just because they were in the Western Conference Finals last year, and they didn't really look to make any moves to try to get back to the WCF this year. I'm going to give Denver a C, and usually C's in this are going to be incomplete, where they didn't really make notable moves. Denver didn't make a single trade at this year's deadline, and they didn't really have to. I would have liked if they were able to get off the Zeke Naji contract, maybe get Cody Martin instead of Cody going to the Phoenix Suns, but this team is still one of the best teams in the Western Conference. I'm still taking them over any team not named the OKC Thunder in the playoffs right now because of Nikola Jokic, the way Russ is playing this year, the Christian Brown breakout, and now that Gordon, Porter Jr., and Murray are all healthy, playing a little bit better. I do think the Denver Nuggets can go back to the NBA Finals. So the Nuggets are just going to get an incomplete C. I'm going to give the Houston Rockets a C-. I don't know if this is a little bit harsh to Houston, but I would have liked to see them add a shooter at this deadline. It didn't have to be somebody like Cam Johnson, who would have went for a decent amount. Could they have gone involved in a Grayson Allen or a Josh Green or a Luke Kennard at the deadline? Because this is one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the NBA, and they're currently at the top of the Western Conference right now as the 3 seed. They did go out and get Jaden Springer from the Boston Celtics to help Boston save a little bit of money, but they don't really need somebody like Jaden Springer. They need shooting. They don't need any more defense. I'm not sure if Jaden Springer is even going to play that much for them outside if they have a few injuries. So I'm going to give Houston a C-. It's kind of an incomplete for them, but I would have liked for them to make a little bit more decisions regarding their poor three-point shooting this year as they're ramping up for hopefully a deep playoff run for them. The San Antonio Spurs are easily getting an A+, just what they were able to pull off in the De'Aaron Fox trade. Easy A+. You got one of the best point guards in the NBA in his prime at 27 years old, probably the beginning of his prime, for matching salary of Zach Collins, Sidy Cissoko, and Trey Jones. You didn't give up any of those future Atlanta picks, and we're going to get to Atlanta in a little bit, but those picks are looking more valuable and valuable by the day, and you have somebody that fits the timeline with Wemby, who already looked so good in his debut against the Atlanta Hawks, and this is going to be one of the best pickups from this year's deadline. Probably not the best pickup, but in most years, it would be the best pickup, and I'm so excited to watch De'Aaron Fox grow with Wemby as a point guard center duo for years and years to come. I'm going to give Washington's trade deadline a B+. I really like this for the Wizards. They went out and they got Marcus Smart, took on his bad money for next year's season, but they also got a 2025 first round pick out of it, and more draft picks the merrier for this Wizards team that is one of the worst teams of all time this season, but is obviously going to be building through the draft, and they're still in their rebuild. They just had to give up second rounders in this deal. They also orchestrated a deal with the Sacramento Kings. Jonas Valanciunas goes to Sacramento. They get Sidy Cissoko and some seconds. They waived Sidy Cissoko. I would have liked if they could somehow have gone a first for Valanciunas, but maybe that was always unrealistic. So that trade maybe hurts it a little bit. Maybe they could have moved Jonas in the offseason. But then I also liked the trade they made with the Milwaukee Bucks. They got AJ Johnson, Chris Middleton, and a 2028 pick swap in exchange for Kyle Kuzma and Patrick Baldwin. I think this is a good trade for the Wizards. They don't need to do anything with Chris Middleton right now. Maybe a team wants to acquire him in the offseason, and you can get either a young player or some seconds for him because he's most likely going to to opt into his player option, but you take a flyer on AJ Johnson, who is a first round pick, and you also get a 2028 swap. I highly doubt that the Wizards are going to be better than the Bucks in 2028, but hey, you never know. It's the National Basketball Association. They probably could have moved Kyle Kuzma a few years ago and gotten more in return, but I think they did all right for Kuzma having one of the worst years of his career. I think Charlotte deserves an A for their 2025 trade deadline. They made two really good deals that I liked a lot. So they made a trade with the Phoenix Suns where they got Yusuf Nurkic. They got to take on his bad money for next year, but they get a 2026 first round pick, which is probably going to be in the 20s, but why not? You're a rebuilding team. You may as well just try to accumulate more draft capital. Like I said before with the Washington Wizards, you trade away Cody Martin, Vasa Micic, and a 2026 second rounder. Really not losing a ton there. So I think that was a good deal by them. And I also like the deal they made with the LA Lakers where they sent out Mark Williams. Definitely a shocker to the LA Lakers. They get Dalton Knecht, Cam Reddish, a 2031 first round pick, and a 2030 pick swap. Now, I don't think those picks are going to have too much value now that the Lakers have Luka Doncic, and they're always going to be competitive with Luka on their team. But Mark Williams has had his injury concerns in the past. They're definitely selling high on him right now, and maybe he performs really well with Luka over there in LA. It makes sense. Luka's made so many centers elevate their games by playing with Luka and having him as a playmaker next to them. But I think this was a good trade for the Charlotte Hornets. They got a whole new regime in the offseason. That regime didn't draft Mark Williams, and this team is bad right now, and maybe they're going to get rewarded with Cooper Flagg in the 2025 draft lottery. But let's stay on the LA Lakers, the team the Charlotte Hornets made a deal with. We'll go back to the Mark Williams deal, but obviously they made the biggest trade at the deadline, pretty much kick-starting the elite 2025 trade deadline, where they acquired Luka Doncic, the 25-year-old superstar who's already made 5 All-NBA first teams in his career. They also picked up Maxi Kleber, Markieff Morris in exchange for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, a 2029 first-round pick, and then Jalen Hood-Schifino got rerouted to the Utah Jazz. Not only is this the best trade from the deadline, it is one of the best trades of all time. It's an easy A+ for the LA Lakers. Luka, a down year for him in 22 games, was putting up 28, 8 and 8, shooting 46% from the field, 35% from 3, and is going to make his debut this weekend. And it's probably going to be the most watched Lakers game in quite some time, which is saying a lot with how popular the LA Lakers are. And just getting somebody that's 25, that is this good historically, that is going to be a perfect replacement for LeBron James as your franchise star when LeBron retires in the next few seasons. Crazy, and then I also do like the deal, them getting Mark Williams. I think that was a win-win trade for the Lakers, though. Mark Williams should elevate his game even more. He does have some defensive lapses, but maybe that was because he was playing on a tanking or just a really bad Charlotte Hornets team. He has been injured in every single year of his career, so if he could stay healthy, this is a home run trade for the Lakers. But if he can't, it's not the end of the world just because you're going to have Luka in 2030 and 2031, so you're really not worried about those picks because Luka's floor for you is always going to be a playoff team. I'm going to give the other LA team a B. The LA Clippers made a few deals. They traded away Kevin Porter Jr., take a flyer on a young player by the name of MarJon Beauchamp from the Milwaukee Bucks. They also acquired Bogdan Bogdanovic from the Atlanta Hawks and 3 second-round picks in exchange for Terrence Mann and Bones Highland. And they also sent out PJ Tucker to the Utah Jazz and Mo Bamba and a second-round pick in exchange for Drew Eubanks and Patty Mills. I think this was a solid deadline for the LA Clippers. They didn't trade anyway future valuable first-round picks, and they definitely got better this year. Bogdan Bogdanovic has been struggling with his three-point shot this year in Atlanta, but has been banged up. And if he can be healthy, I like him a lot better in this LA Clippers offense. And the Clippers saved money at this year's deadline as well. So I think they did a good job with all their restrictions. I didn't really hate the Zach LaVine trade for the Chicago Bulls, but looking at their trade deadline as a whole, I'm giving them a D. That was the only trade they made, was sending Zach LaVine to the Sacramento Kings. They got their protection lifted off their first-round pick from the Spurs, and they got back Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and Zach Collins. I would have liked them to still trade Nikola Vucevic. I know they extended Lonzo Ball, but I would have preferred if they traded him as well. They have way too many guards on their roster right now. Even if there was a market for Josh Giddey, I would have looked at trading him as well. So I think Chicago, with all things considered at the deadline this year, really didn't get that much worse, even though they are going to be bad and they may fall out of the play-in tournament spot. I don't know if they're going to be bad enough to have a high percentage chance at winning the 2025 draft lottery and winning the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes. So I feel like Chicago is still just scared to fully hit that reset button. I still would have moved Nikola Vucevic to Golden State, even if the first round pick wasn't that good in value. So the Milwaukee Bucks made a few trades. I talked about it before with the Clippers, but they sent out MarJon Beauchamp. They acquired KPJ, trading a little bit of defense for a little bit of offense. And obviously KPJ is a little bit more of a veteran than Beauchamp. They traded for Kyle Kuzma, who was having one of the worst years of his career from the Washington Wizards, and traded away kind of a franchise legend in Chris Middleton, and they also
Yeah.
rerouted Patrick Baldwin Jr. that they got in that deal with cash to the San Antonio Spurs. I'm going to give the Bucks a C+. I didn't really love this deadline for them. When they made that trade with the Washington Wizards, that got them under the second apron. So I really thought we were going to see another deal be made by the Milwaukee Bucks, and they were going to go even more all in this season. We didn't see that happen, and I'm not sure if this Bucks team is going to make it to at least the conference finals this year, because Boston's still really good, New York's still really good, Cleveland got better. I didn't really love it for Milwaukee at this year's deadline. For the Toronto Raptors, I'm going to give them a B+. They got a player of Brandon Ingram's caliber for nowhere near what he should realistically go for. They sent off Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a 2026 first-round pick via the Pacers, and a second-rounder, and they get somebody that's in his prime who could put up 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists on good efficiency, one of the best mid-range shooters in the league. The only caveat to that is they got to extend Brandon Ingram in the offseason, and he's going to cost a pretty penny. They also traded away Davion Mitchell to the Miami Heat for PJ Tucker, a second-round pick, and cash considerations, and they also acquired James Wiseman in cash for basically nothing from the Indiana Pacers. So yeah, this is going to be a B+ for me. I do worry about this team's ceiling when they extend Brandon Ingram, and they're going to be over the salary cap and near the luxury tax with Emmanuel Quickley, Ingram, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl. I don't think that ceiling is super high in the Eastern Conference unless Scotty Barnes takes a leap next year or the year after that to a top 10 player in the league. So yeah, I think it's a little bit wait and see for the Raptors, but they got a really good player for nowhere near than what he should have went for. They took advantage with New Orleans trading Brandon Ingram probably a year and a half too late. The Boston Celtics, I'm going to give a C to. They only made one trade at the deadline. They traded away Jaden Springer to the Houston Rockets and attaching a second-round pick. With that, Boston really didn't need to make a move. They're the reigning NBA champions, and they have their starting 5 if they can all stay healthy for the playoffs, and they are a second apron team as well. So I didn't really think they needed to make another move. The OKC Thunder, I'm going to give a C. They only made one deal, and that was with the New Orleans Pelicans. They acquired Daniel Tice and a second-round pick, so New Orleans could get under the luxury tax, basically. Yeah, it's just a C. I mean, the Thunder are the best team in the better conference this year. They're just getting Chet Holmgren back, so that could be like their big trade deadline acquisition. I would have liked if they went after Cam Johnson, but they didn't really have to. I don't know if this is going to be harsh, but I'm going to give the Utah Jazz an F. John Collins, Colin Sexton, and Jordan Clarkson are all still on this team after the deadline. John Collins could leave for nothing in the offseason. They helped LA shed some money. They got a second-round pick for basically Drew Eubanks and Patty Mills. They got involved in the Luka Doncic trade, getting Jalen Hood-Schifino. They got involved in the Jimmy Butler trade, getting a 2031 second. I don't know. I just feel like this wasn't a good enough selling deadline for the Utah Jazz. They are really bad this year. They're one of the worst teams in the NBA, and they could still end up with really good odds to get Cooper Flagg. That's fine with me. I would have just liked if they gotten a little bit more additional draft capital, preferably in the first round, for some of their good veterans that could have been on the block, like I mentioned before, of John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, and Colin Sexton. Next up, I'm going to talk about the Memphis Grizzlies, who were active at the end of the trade deadline leading up to the final hour, and they ended up trading away Marcus Smart and a 2025 first for 2 second-round picks, basically cutting costs on that Marcus Smart trade they made in a 3-team deal with Washington and Boston a few years ago. And they also sent Jake Laravia to Sacramento. This got worked into a bigger 3-team deal. I didn't really love this deadline for the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm going to give it a C because they definitely didn't get better at this year's deadline, but I don't think they got worse by any means. Like, they get Marcus Smart off their team. I thought that could have been used in a bigger trade down the line. We all thought when Marcus Smart got traded, there was a chance this was going to be in a Kevin Durant deal because they did check in on him. I just don't like them trading away Jake Laravia for basically nothing, but I know they have a depth issue in a good way, so that's why I'm just going to give them a C instead of something like a D+ or C-. And then the Dallas Mavericks, I'm not going to be too harsh on them, but you could definitely give them an F. I'm going to give them a D for their deadline. They went out, they got Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a future first-round pick for basically Luka Doncic. We all know why that could end in just a disaster in a few years if they don't win a ring with AD and Kyrie kind of towards the end of their primes. And I just feel like if they made Luka Doncic available to the rest of the league, they could have gone a lot more in exchange for him. I know they got clowned a lot for the Quentin Grimes and a second for Caleb Martin deal, but if Caleb Martin could be healthy in the playoffs, I do think he can have like a Josh Hart light impact for them, where he's going to crash the offensive glass, he can lock in defensively, and just be a good connecting piece for them. And Quentin Grimes was probably going to make a little bit more than what Caleb Martin makes right now in the offseason, so they technically save some money right there. But yeah, they're going to get clowned on a ton. If you want to give them an F for trading away Luka Doncic, that is fine with me, but I'm going to give it a D just on the sole fact that they could win it all this year with Anthony Davis. They are currently the 8th seed in the Western Conference, but it is very tight right there. And there's a scenario where they don't even make the playoffs this year, which would really make this Luka trade look like the worst deal of all time. Man, what was Atlanta doing at the trade deadline? They are getting an F for me. Does their front office know they do not own own their first round pick at this year's 2025 draft, unprotected, it goes to the San Antonio Spurs. And the Atlanta Hawks right now are currently the 9th seed in the Eastern Conference. They've been one of the worst teams over the last few weeks since Jalen Johnson is out for the year. They're 23-28. They can't really score right now outside of Trae Young. And they got worse at the deadline. They traded away DeAndre Hunter to the Cleveland Cavaliers in exchange for Karis LeVert, George Niang, a 2026 and 2028 first-round pick swaps. I don't think there's a very high chance that Atlanta is going to be better than Cleveland in 26 and 28, where those picks are going to be valuable. They also got 3 second-rounders in that deal, but they didn't need to trade DeAndre Hunter right now. He's under contract for the next 3 years, and he's your second-best player currently for a team that needs to win because they do not own their first-round pick. What if they just gifted Cooper Flagg to the San Antonio Spurs? They also made the trade with the LA Clippers. They gave up 3 seconds to get off of Bogdan Bogdanovic's contract, and they took on Terrence Mann and Bones Highland. Not sure how that's an upgrade there either. And they also traded away Cody Zeller and a 2028 second to Houston for nothing in return, just to get under the luxury tax. Woohoo! You guys got under the luxury tax, and you guys are 5 games under 500. You're a bottom 10 team in the NBA right now, and you don't own your first round pick in the 25 draft. I don't know how they didn't upgrade at the deadline. They were apparently linked to Brandon Ingram, so they wanted to get better in some way, shape, or form. Why didn't they? And I'm going to give the Miami Heat a B+. I think they did very well in the Jimmy Butler trade. We all thought he lost a lot of leverage because he was kind of a drama queen for the Miami Heat. He said he didn't want to sign an extension with Golden State. He ends up signing one, but this was a 4-team deal. They acquired Andrew Wiggins. They got PJ Tucker. They rerouted him, Kyle Anderson, and a 2025 Warriors first-round pick, which is top 10 protected, and they sent Jimmy Butler to Golden State in a deal that involved Detroit and Utah. And they haven't really had Jimmy Butler all year, so they technically get better in this deal, and I think there is going to be a tier drop-off between the Heat as the 6th seed and the Pistons, Magic, and Hawks as the 7, 8, 9. I think the Heat are going to be a non-playing tournament team, playoff team now, and they get Andrew Wiggins, who could be a really good connecting piece in the SPO offense and defense. They get a Warriors first-round pick, which could end up being 11, 12, 13, or 14 this year, or maybe it's just 15. I don't think that pick is going to be any lower than that. So I think they made out very well in this deal. They're going to be competitive post Jimmy Butler, and they avoided having to pay Jimmy Butler $60 million a year. So let's just talk about the Golden State Warriors. I'm going to give them a B-. I don't love this Jimmy Butler trade. I wonder what their ceiling currently is, because right now in the Western Conference, they are the 11th seed. They're 25-25. They've had their fair share of injuries as of late, and I don't know if Jimmy Butler is the missing piece for this team. Now, I'm giving them a B-. It's a positive grade because I applaud them trying to make a win-now move around Steph Curry and Draymond Green. They're not getting any younger, but you added somebody that is the same age as them, basically. You just committed $120 million after this year to Jimmy Butler. It's a little scary. So, hey, maybe there's a scenario where this team loses in round 1, they reshuffle their roster in the offseason, and they're going to be a top 4 seed in the West next year, and you're at least going out trying before Steph Curry retires, and you only had to give up 1 first-round pick, and maybe it's going to be 14 or 15 in this year's draft. Or, hey, maybe you lose in the play-in tournament this year, you got to give Miami the 12th overall pick, and then you don't make the playoffs next year. And then this trade could look like a disaster. Next up, we have the Philadelphia 76ers, who made a lot of weird moves at the deadline. I'm going to give them a C. Now, I don't fault Daryl Morey for not trying to buy more or sell more. They're in a really weird spot. I do think they can be competitive if they can get fully healthy at the end of the year with Maxey, Embiid, and George all playing together. I'm not sure if it's going to end up in a round 1 series win, but at least they can stay competitive where they're not going to give the OKC Thunder the 7th overall pick. They can give them the 15th overall pick. They sent KJ Martin in 2 seconds to the Pistons. That helped them save some money, and now they can give Gershon Yabusele the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is huge. Gershon's been great for them this year, and they definitely need to re-sign him in the offseason. They also sent Caleb Martin to the Dallas Mavericks. They got Quentin Grimes, who's a good 3-and-D piece and is younger than Caleb Martin. They also traded away Reggie Jackson and a 2026 first-round pick in exchange for Jared Butler and 4 seconds. A little bit of a head-scratching move right there. So it was definitely a weird deadline. I thought Daryl Morey was cooking up something bigger. He did not. I'm going to give them a C, though. The Portland Trailblazers are going to get a D for me. Now, they've been a great team over the last few weeks, and I'm excited to just watch them night in and night out now, with Scoot playing better, Clingan at times. Denny of Diaz been great for them, but why didn't they trade Robert Williams or any of their depth on their team that they don't need in the future? Why do we have a 3-center rotation of Aiden, Clingan, and Robert Williams on this team still? So they're just getting a D, just basically because they didn't trade Robert Williams. Even if it was for 2 second-round picks, I don't think you're getting anything better than that in the offseason. Maybe teams were scared about his injury history, but either way, the Blazers, maybe not even getting a little bit worse because they're playing pretty good right now, and that could hurt them in the draft lottery. I don't know. I just wasn't the biggest fan of the Blazers at the deadline. Next up, we have the New Orleans Pelicans. I'm going to give them a D+. I alluded to it before when I talked about the Raptors trading for Brandon Ingram, but the Pelicans traded him way too late. They got Bruce Brown, who they could probably re-sign in the offseason. Kelly Olynyk, who's under contract next year, and a 2026 first-round pick via the Pacers in this deal. And they also traded Daniel Tice and a 2031 second to OKC to get under the luxury tax. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this deadline for the Pelicans. They didn't try to move CJ McCollum, and I just think the return for Brandon Ingram isn't great. Now they avoid paying him. At least they got something for him compared to him leaving for nothing in the offseason. But I don't know. I think it was just a sad way for the Brandon Ingram era to go out in New Orleans. The Orlando Magic didn't make a single trade. I'm going to give them a C-. Now, they don't need to make a win-now move because they're a fairly young team. They've been decimated by injuries this year, and maybe they're going to be a first-round exit or a play-in tournament exit. That's fine as long as their young core continues to develop. I would have liked for them to add some shooting because they are one of the worst three-point shooting teams of the 21st century. And I'm going to give the Cleveland Cavaliers the final team here in A. They acquired DeAndre Hunter for LeVert, Niang, 2 swaps that I don't think are ever going to hurt Cleveland, and 3 second-round picks. And they now have a closing 5 of Garland, Mitchell, Hunter, Mobley, and Allen. I would have liked for them to get a backup center. Maybe they address that in the buyout market. But either way, they were able to keep the Strus contract into the offseason. They were able to keep Isaac Okoro. This was a home run trade for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I still have no idea what Atlanta was doing at the deadline. That is going to be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, I would appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And make sure you check out Underdog and use code SROS.
I can't starting 6-7 rotation. Insane, bro. Hawks fan here. Pretty sure our front office forgot we don't own our picks. Okay. Giving Utah an F for getting 5 SRPs for free as well. Second round pick, so. This is definitely like the craziest trade deadline I've ever seen, bro. Like, I remember, like, I have my Twitter notifications on for, well, it was Woj and Shams, but now it's just Shams. I'm just scrolling, bro. I'm like, damn, all these trades is going through right now? This is insane. I don't even know when the trade deadline was or what the end was. But for days, my shit was going off.